Hi there, and thanks for joining me. I'm Peter K. de Villiers, and this is Gaps and Gains, where I answer your questions around business automation, systems, processes, and a bit of AI in the mix too. So I'll get straight into it. First question today is, why do I feel like I'm always putting out fires instead of building something? And the short answer is probably because you've got no defined systems and processes. Now, on its own, if I left the answer there, it's probably not particularly helpful. So let's elaborate on that a bit. The putting out of fires isn't inherently a bad thing. It happens in all businesses, and sometimes that is the necessary thing. But if that is what every day feels like, is that you get into the office or you turn up for work every day and all you're doing is putting out fires, then, like the question suggests, you don't get round to actually building something. It's very difficult, and I'd say impossible, if you use an analogy, it's impossible to redecorate your house and build an extension and fit a new kitchen whilst the living room is on fire. Okay? And that's what happens in businesses. And if you have to keep putting out those fires, there's a problem. Now, if we stick with a building analogy, stick with me here, then you want to find out, well, why do fires keep happening? And in a house, it's negligence. Electric's old, faulty light fittings, faulty electrical appliances. So the equivalent in your business would be that things happen in the business that haven't been planned for, that there's no contingency made for. The team's perhaps not trained on how to deal with these things. And you don't have systems and processes in place. Anything's documented or automated that actually allows the team to just operate the business rather than it's almost like it's a new day every day and different chaos that needs to be dealt with, different fires. So I'd say that's where you would start. If that's the way it feels, you want to look at, okay, the underlying cause is likely a lack of systems and processes, automation, and potentially training and having a qualified team. And how you can start fixing that is by actually just defining some initial basic processes for it. So whether that just be the initial lead follow-up, or a more fundamental thing could be that you look at, well, actually, not just how are you generating leads, because it's the leads coming into the business that then everything falls out of that. So any chaos that comes after is potentially because of the kinds of leads you're generating, the kinds of customers that you're bringing on, and the types of work that you're doing. So you can look at it and say, well, okay, let's say you're an electrician. Do you actually want to do reactive response work? Now, there's potentially a higher rate involved in that, because if someone needs you today and they need you in the next 2 hours, you can charge more for that semi-emergency service, a bit like a locksmith can. Or you can say, well, actually, no, we're only going to do new builds. That's what we work on. We work with contractors, we do new builds and full rewires, that kind of work, which is planned and scheduled and doesn't really involve emergencies. Now, the plans and the schedules might change as the project runs, but it's no one's going to ring you up and say, oh, my fuse board has just blown up. I need someone here in the next hour. Or if it's a commercial property, the business can't run until this is fixed. We need someone here right away. So it depends on how you want to run your business. And for most businesses, you should have the option and you should be able to say, well, actually, we're only going to focus on generating these kinds of leads because it leads to this type of work that allows me to run my business in this way. So it's a combination of the kinds of leads you're getting, the kinds of customers you serve, but then also under those, how do you have systems and processes in place to deal with those scenarios and how you can best serve that. Another analogy I'll use for that is if you look at emergency services. So I remember many years ago we needed to call an ambulance for our then 14-month-old daughter. And interestingly, the first person to show up was actually on a motorbike, obviously with limited equipment and supplies available, but could get here a lot quicker than a full-scale ambulance could, and could assess the situation really quickly and then make the decision, does the full-scale ambulance still need to come? And when they come, is it immediately whisked away to hospital, or can it be sorted in the home, and how that works? Now, that means you can send the motorbikes out really quickly, and you don't need to necessarily, for all of them, follow it up with a full ambulance. So you can just see how you can structure, even in such an emergency situation, you can structure how things happen rather than it just being chaos and firefighting. So hope that helps with that question. Moving on, we've got related. Is the chaos I experience normal, or is something fundamentally wrong with my business? Well, I'd say the chaos is normal, unfortunately, because that's how the vast majority of businesses run. The vast majority of small businesses are a bit chaotic. And it is just, again, because of a lack of systems and processes and automation. And everything relies on the owner, and the rest of the team tend to be a group of assistants, and nobody's taking any action unless the owner is driving that. Now, just because it's normal to experience that chaos doesn't mean that you need to keep living that way and keep running your business that way. So there's not a fundamental flaw in your business, but there will be things that you can change. In the same way for the firefighting, there will be things that you can change to calm that chaos and to eventually minimize it as much as possible, depending on the underlying business that you're running. Now, well documented and planned systems and processes help an awful lot with that. And a lot of it can also be done using automation. And it's not necessarily just a case of getting automation to do stuff for you, but it's also using automation to help your team to know what to do for whom next and what the priorities are. Because you can set up automation. Don't just think of the automation as, well, sending out emails, whilst that is part of it, but it's also driving your workflow and your process so that task A is completed and a project moves from stage 1 to stage 2, it generates tasks for the right people to then do the next thing. So they're guided. There's an underlying system that guides the team on what they need to do next, and where they need to go from that. So if you think about, if we go back to an electrician again, and working on a new build, once the planning has been done, and let's assume that has all gone the way it should, the first thing that the electrician will do is the first fix, which is generally putting in the back boxes and conduit where required and running in the cables, but no switches, no sockets, because of course the building site is still a building site, it's a right mess. If you fit anything else, it'll all get damaged. So you just run all the cables in, and now you've got everything in place, and things will change and need to be moved around. But now you know that first fix is completed. Now you're not going to come and do second fix, at least until all the walls are plastered, maybe even painted, depending on the project. So therefore, once that happens, then you know that you then schedule that to go out, and for the second fix to start taking place, and the testing and commissioning of the installation. But in the meantime, the team is busy perhaps doing second fix elsewhere or first fix elsewhere, and it's not running from one site to the next, just doing bits and pieces here and there, and it can be more planned. But of course, when they show up in the morning, there's a dashboard that tells them, okay, this is what you're doing next, and this is where you're going, and this is how much you're doing. And that works for office work, and it works for pretty much anything that is structured, organized work. You can use automation to create the underlying structure for the work that needs to be done, rather than everyone making it up as they go along. And that is what causes the feeling of chaos, is the fact that you turn up on a Monday morning and nobody's really sure what needs to happen, and then the phone starts ringing and the emails come in and everything kicks off and it feels like chaos. So again, you can solve a lot of that through the use of automation, but before you get to the automation, you need to know what the process is that you want to automate and what elements of that. So there's some thinking to go in first. Moving on to the next question. How do I delegate effectively without the work coming back to me? So if you're the owner, it's all great getting a team involved and passing work on to the team, but if they come and knock on your door every 5 or 10 minutes because they don't know how to do the next bit, or they're not sure what to do in a situation, then it feels like you're delegating small bits and pieces, but everything still relies on you, which means you can't get on and do other work. So it's all in how you delegate and the focus for it. So if you just delegate tasks and you say to someone, go and do this, then that's what they'll go and do, and then they'll come back to you and ask you, well, what do they need to do next? Whereas if you actually say to them, okay, this is the outcome we're after, you want to delegate the outcomes, and then you have systems and processes that guide them on how to achieve those outcomes, and also what is acceptable within your business can be driven by those, so that the outcome is by Friday we need to have the first fix for the electrician finished on this 4-bedroom house. Let's say, for example, that's what it is. Now, in that scenario, you're not delegating, go and fit the back boxes in all the bedrooms, and then go and fit the conduit in the kitchen, and go and run the cables in the bathrooms. That would be the wrong way to delegate, because, okay, I fit the back boxes, now I'll come back to the boss. What do you want me to do next? What do you want me to do next? Now, that's fine for an apprentice, for someone really new in the business and they don't actually know what they're doing yet. But if you've got a team of people working for you, you really want to be able to say, okay, go and achieve X, and there's systems and processes that tells you how to do that. Now, in something like electrical installation, there's a whole book of regulations that tell you how you're allowed to do that work, what you can do and what you can't. So there's an underlying thing there. But in your business, whatever it may be, for the most part, you get to make those rules. But as long as you have defined those rules, and then you can delegate the outcome that you want from your team, they'll come back to you a lot less, because they've actually got the guidance and they can go and achieve those outcomes. So they'll still come to you with questions at times, but it'll be a lot less. And if you then use automation to drive those systems, so that when the task is created for someone to do X, the task contains a description and maybe a link to the reference of how this kind of work is done. And as someone gets more experience in your business, they'll click on that link a lot less, but you have delegated the outcome rather than the individual task. And that'll make a real difference in how people interact, and whether they come back to you and how often, and what kinds of questions they come and ask. Because generally they'll come and ask you the questions that they can't find in the information or the processes that you've provided. And that's an opportunity for you to know how to improve the process, and you can involve them in that too, which makes it well cemented in the team, and you get their buy-in for that. So next question, what's the minimum automation setup that makes a meaningful difference quickly? So obviously it's one of those it depends questions, but I'd say for the majority of small businesses, the initial system, and when I work with clients, we implement a foundation system in, which is all focused on the initial response to an inquiry, and then sort of an education follow-up, educating the new lead on the business and why they should know, like, and trust you, and then also the ongoing on, this is how we work, this is the kind of work we do. And that's a a background communication that goes on in parallel to you maybe talking on the phone to someone, but that's automated in the background. And what that does for you is, on the one hand, you have the benefit of that initial response and a prompt, reliable initial response to an inquiry, which makes a real difference to your conversion rate of those leads. So there's real value in that. They get to know your business really quickly, but it also means they get to know the same business for every lead, rather than them getting to know your business depending on who picks up the phone and who they talk to and who emails them. You get to set the impression of your business in a very uniform manner for all the leads that come in. And again, that helps a lot with lead conversion. And then there's a longer term campaign that we put in place that generally runs for at least 12 weeks. And that's just nurture. That's just providing information, interesting information about the business, how you work, the kinds of work you do, that kind of thing that you put in place. And that's really there because just because someone inquires today, and again, this depends a bit on your business, but just because someone inquires today doesn't mean that they are ready to buy today. So I'll give you an example for us. We put our house on the market 18 months ago, had it on the market for 6 months. No real valuable offers came out of that. Going into the summer last year, we decided to take it off the market and try again later. We put it again on the market at the start of this year, and we are now in the end of June, and we've just accepted an offer. So that's roughly an 18-month process. And interestingly, the houses that we are looking at for us to buy now that we have an offer, the majority of them are with an agent who we first viewed a property with 18 months ago. And he has actually rung me or emailed me roughly every 3 weeks for the last 18 months. And it's very likely that he will get the business and that we'll buy a house through him. But he has been consistent in getting in touch. Now, I don't know what system he has in place to remind him to get in touch with me, because I'm sure I'm not the only person he is getting in touch with. But he's really looked after us. He's really been interested in the 18 months of how we're doing. Have we found a buyer? Have we found properties that we want to buy? And the like. So the longer term automation means that just because I'm not ready to buy today, I don't forget about your business, and you keep coming back. You just consistently, you keep showing up. And if you know that, so this foundation system contains, I'd say, 16 to 20 touch points over the course of 4 months, and you know that every lead you generate will receive that. It makes a real difference in the business, because you know that the leads are being nurtured. It improves your conversion rate, and that's what business is about. You get more business out of it, but everyone has a consistent experience, a really sharp, quick initial response, which makes a real difference. But the team doesn't have to jump on those things. They go into a system, and then of course the team can follow up and do what needs to happen there. So I'd say that's sort of the basic. You then, once you've got that in place, then you can start doing all the clever stuff that then manages your process and task generation and that side of things, and get into some really cool integrations and get AI involved in everything. But I'd recommend minimum get this foundation piece in place. You'll see a real difference. It allows you to dip your toe in the water of automation without feeling like you have to jump all the way in and completely change your business because you've now decided to start using automation. And then you can just incrementally add onto the system, make improvements, and expand it that way. That's what I would do there. Moving on to our last question. This one's more specifically directed at me. Have you ever run a business yourself, or do you just advise on them? So yes, I've run businesses myself. So I think over the last 12 years that I've been doing this automation business process work, I have only spent 12 months out of that actually employed by someone else, and those were in, quite interestingly, 2 different 6-month stints, almost at the opposite ends of those. They were almost 10 years apart. And then before I did that, for going on 7-8 years, ran my own electrical contracting business and home automation installation before home automation was as easy as it is today. None of the smart stuff existed back then. So out of the last 20 years, 19 of those, I've been self-employed, running my own business, and that included the electrical and home automation business, this business process automation, a couple of software companies building software products and selling those, and some consulting along the side with those. So yeah, I don't just advise on them. This is me running my own business as well, but I've run different businesses in the past. And that's that for this week's episode. Thanks for joining me here on Gaps and Gains, and I look forward to you joining me again next week. I'll be here. I hope you are too. I'm Peter K. de Villiers, Blind Spot Works. Find the gaps, fix the business.